And then we follow with Birgit Heitzig, who will moderate the next panel. I have to say that Birgit did a fantastic job in the edition of this wonderful magazine, which is the special issue. You have two versions, one English version and one French version of EcoCop, the magazine which has been published for this event by Birgit. Then I make some advertising for Birgit magazine. Birgit?
Yes, hi. So I'm Birgit Heitzig. I'm the publisher and chief editor of the magazine Green Film Shooting, which is published once in a year at the Berlin Film Festival, and it's focusing on sustainable film and media production. And so this time I had the pleasure for EcoPort and Film for Climate to produce this EcoCorp magazine, which is about all the activities which are done by EcoPort and Film for Climate, and it's very important really to raise public awareness towards the COP, which is coming up. So, and today I have the pleasure to welcome an international crowd. So first of all, there is Lydia Pilcher from PGA Green, and Lydia, please come up on stage. So when I have been talking to organizations and so on, and they were about setting up best practices, whenever I was asking, did you have any role models? So it's always PGA Green, the Producers Guild of America, the Green division, which is mentioned. And so, yeah, I think it's really famous what you guys are doing. And Lydia is from New York. She's also a producer. You've produced films by Mira Noir and others. And so before we start, I first would like to welcome the others. So we also have Truls from Norway, who is the president of the European Film Commissions, which is a network of 25 film commissions. One of them is Michael we had on stage, and Christiane from Hamburg, who had issued more than 60 green shooting cards already. And so, Truls, welcome you. It's a big pleasure because you are very influential and can maybe make it happen that all film commissions eventually will go green, as Novena already does. I mean, she's the Italian power woman. So, and then we also have from Mexican, Ivan Trujillo, who's a festival director of Guadalajara. And Ivan hosted a Film for Climate People. They had a green summit in Mexico in March. And there it was really happening. There were people from Sony, from Germany, from all over the world. And they said, well, we have really to take some action. Talking is cheap, but we really want to do something. And so they discussed, in order to get some results, that it's really on time, that somebody has to do a world protocol, a declaration which everybody can sign and say, okay, the whole film and media world really sticks together, and we really demand that everybody should produce green as far as they can in order to do their work. And so today now we have this declaration by EcoPort and Film for Climate, and everybody is really asked to sign it. And of course, this is a basic, and there's much more work to do. But if I look back, 3 years ago when I really started this magazine, a lot of things have been happening in terms of sustainable film production. On the other hand, it's just, as we say in Germany, a little drop on a hot stone, because it's very little. So there's a lot of work in front of us. But I think it's a great conference, and there are so many people and wonderful activities, and so we just have to do much more than this. And then we have Christopher Food from Kenya. Kenya is a film commission. And this is really wonderful because so far Africa had been a kind of a white spot on the green map, but now this will really change thanks to you. And then I really want to have a very, very warm welcome for Slater. She is really a young hero. She's here, she will be at the court. And Slater was shooting films when she was 5 years old, believe it or not, but she explained me in the interview. So she grew up basically with a camera in her hands, and it's amazing. Since 8 years she has been traveling all around the world. She has been to the Copenhagen and made so many different experiences, but also some frustrations, I think, with all the high hopes. And Slater is doing a film which is called An Inconvenience Use, and I can't really wait to see it, but today we are going to see the first 4 minutes, which will be presented in public the first time, so it's a little premiere. And Slater will be at the COP21 on the December 3rd on the Youth Day, and I think this will be very exciting, so because she is really somebody who's standing in for the whole young generation, and it's also the future of the world we're talking about on the long run. And so, but now I would like to start with Lydia. I mean, PGA Green, it's really something. Oh, Manu is still here. Oh, he's not coming. No, I understood he's not coming.
No, sorry.
Okay. So we didn't forget Manu. He couldn't make it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, with the PGA Green, you got all the Hollywood studios on your side, and they have their sustainable programs, which is really very impressive. But on the other hand, it's not so easy. I mean, you guys had to do really hard work to make it all happening, and then also there are things like you had in New York this wonderful organization, FilmBiz, which had to close down. Also, people like Emily O'Brown, the supervisor, really worked a lot of them. So maybe for all of the people who don't know so much about the PGA Green, you explain how it was founded, started, how you made it, and now what are your main goals?
Thank you. Well, PGA Green really started, we were a group of producers that happened to be environmental activists. And those of us, we were like-minded. We had gone to Nashville. We had trained on the climate change slideshow that Al Gore presented on Inconvenient Truth. So we were actually working for the Climate Reality Project. And through that, the Alliance for Climate Protection asked us if we would do a pilot project where we measured the carbon footprint of a film production. And this was in 2006. And Mary Jo Winkler was about to begin line producing Sam Mendes' film, Away We Go, and we asked Focus if they would be the pilot project and let us do this carbon calculation to take the measurement at the beginning of the production, then make adjustments, measure it again, and see what we could accomplish. And the project was so successful and everybody was so impressed that the studios we discovered had been talking amongst themselves for a couple of years, even though they're competitors and they're not supposed to be working together. They had been having conversations about sustainability and what were they going to do with the film industry in Hollywood. And they came to us and said it would make things so much easier if we could work through a third-party group and let you take the lead and we'll support you. And we were surprised but flattered and interested. And we formed the Green Production Guide, .com, which is a website that includes a few different things on it. I left some cards out on the table if anybody wants to look it up. But we have a vendor guide that's international. It's kind of a crowdsourcing vendor guide. So everybody if you work in a city or a different place, you have vendors that you like, you can list them on the guide, and then the next people who come to that city already know who the successful vendors are to work with in greening your production. We have the carbon calculator that the studios really devised, and it's downloadable and probably similar to the ones that you've heard about today. But the great thing is that it's endorsed by all the studios. And we have the PGA Green Best Practices. We wrote a best practices that kind of took the best of all the best practices available, the ones that as producers we felt really ensured the success of running a green production. And then along the way, we found that as we were putting all this out there, we were, doing panels and seminars and trainings. We would find that the thing that we would hit up the most against was that, people who weren't as like-minded as us would say, well, it's expensive, it's too expensive, And we would say, but that's not true. And so we went on a mission to do a cost-benefit analysis of taking your production green. And that also is a report that you can download on greenproductionguide.com. And it really makes the case for saving money by going green. And we collected all the data and we ran the stats, and you can see it, and it's a great thing if you ever run up against that argument. It's a great thing to present and show. The other thing that we have found that is really important is that it's, while it takes a producer, right, and a director really, and sometimes the cast, to really help set the tone and set the mandate, there's a lot of work that has to happen to green a film. And the development of a category of a crew person now, which we call the eco-supervisor, some people call them environmental stewards. We started out by calling them green PAs, but we felt like we needed to elevate their status. This person is really essential to making it all work. And recently I was doing a movie in Uganda and Johannesburg with Mira Nair. It's a Walt Disney movie, Queen of Katwe, that'll come out next year. But when I got to Uganda, I was like, I don't have anyone here. So we flew in an eco-supervisor from New York who did 2 weeks in Uganda, trained two eco-supervisors, two local Ugandan eco-supervisors. And then I brought her back when we moved to Johannesburg, and she trained eco-supervisors in Johannesburg. And so we were successfully able to, calculate our entire carbon footprint on this production. We have a sustainability report that we do at the end of every movie so that we can share the results with other producers. But it really, not only did we create 4 new eco-supervisors on the continent of Africa, we were able to successfully green our film by just incorporating that crew position. And I think that, you need to set achievable goals. You can't do everything. You have to take into consideration, the specificity of the place where you're shooting and what the priorities are. And then you have to work with all of the department heads to facilitate them to do what they can do within their realm.
Great, I think we should pick up on that. So you trained 4 eco-supervisors. So this is very good news for Christoph, because Christoph is in this wonderful situation. I heard in the Kenya Film Commission, he is able to create some financial incentive for film producers. And so my question is, Christoph, from also experience, many film commissions and film funds have, is like a lot of producers are not willing it just for going green by itself for sake. But if it's linked to the money, then it's much easier. So maybe, I don't know, when you're going to set up your film incentive program, are you considering that you make it a condition that they do something like maybe deliver carbon footprint, or the last installments they only get if they do something? Is this an option you consider?
Great, thanks for that. By the way, I was wearing a tie, and then I suddenly realised I was the only person in the room wearing a tie, so I haven't really meet a whole lot of creatives, so you take your tie off very quickly. One of the things, just by way of context, we're the babies here. I mean, Sweden, you're a teenager compared to us in this. But it's very interesting because, as many of you will know, and you probably saw when you're filming in Uganda, although you should have filmed in Kenya, was necessity's mother invention there. You know, David, you're talking about recycling a film set in Kenya. Will be used 5 or 6 times, backwards, sideways, over the top, you name it. No one will throw that away. So one of the interesting dynamics we're looking at is what is actually the carbon footprint at the moment. And of course, as we're building up the legislation, I mean, we deal with the legislation, the regulation side, and the licensing side, which is the stick side. But a lot of it's market driven, which is, it's much cheaper for people to recycle in Kenya than it is for you guys. It's much cheaper for us to use solar power than to use electricity. It's much easier. You know, there's so many dynamics. We're already implementing things that are carbon footprint friendly, but not because of any other thing than the market or necessity. I mean, if you imagine filming in one of your sites of special scientific interest, that is sort of your everyday filming in Kenya. So in terms of how do you get there, one of the big things we've seen recently is a change. There used to be a lot of helicopter flying for filming, but now obviously with the drones coming in, the reduction in tax on drones, that's dropped right down in terms of that particular carbon footprint. Heating, we don't have any issues of heating that you guys do. And it's very interesting seeing some of the discussion. In Kenya, where we've got a huge flower industry, and some of the carbon footprint discussion we've had on that is very similar to the discussion we're having with film, both broadcast and feature, because people will say, oh, the air miles are flying out to Kenya, flying out your crew, etc. But we say, yeah, but if you look at our production offices and our heating bills and so forth, they're minuscule by comparison. So to answer you, we're in the situation where we're still trying to quantify what really is the impact for us. We know there's a lot we can do, and it's great listening to some of these protocols and tools, which we will definitely put in. And at the licensing level, we'll introduce them, which is, in Kenya, in order to film, you have to have a film license. So we control that. We don't have the luxury of a film fund, which we're trying to get, but we control the license. So we can make a whole load of conditions and caveats in order to get the license. So that's one side. But really at the stage at the moment, it's to... I love the fact that you're saying it saves money, and somebody earlier on was saying it saves money. That's the big thing at the moment. We're really struggling in terms of trying to put Kenya on the map. And if you speak to any of the production houses, whether it's the guys who are knocking out a TV series, they'll knock one out in 1 week for $5,000, or the guys trying to bring in the big feature films, it's all market driven. So those are the sort of tools which we will put into the licensing. We don't really have the fiscal whip at the moment, but we do have the licensing whip, and of course the market drives most of it as well.
Yeah, and you also can maybe do some more awareness building.
Exactly. I mean, one of the great things, and Donald, thanks for bringing me here, is the relationships we need now going forward. Every single person who's spoken today, I would love to get out to Kenya to help us build this, because we can take the best practice globally, make it appropriate for where we're at, and put it into either legislation or at least put it as an available resource for our filmmakers. So it's exciting times for us. So maybe in a year's time, if we have this conversation, you can see what we've done.
Yeah, great. It's all about networking, and so we're coming to choose. As a president of the European Film Commission Network with its 29 organizations, yeah, you are really in the poor position to make them to go all green. Yourself, you're coming from Norway, where we have a lot of water power, and so there's no need to cool even the server, so you have green IT by itself. But for the rest, I understood, as Michael was saying, there are not so many sustainable activities yet. But how is it within the European Film Commission network? Because, for example, Cineregio already has a green group. So is it a mix of different positions and perspective, or is this not so much of an issue?
First of all, thank you for bringing me here. It has been very inspiring to hear all this, and I'm lucky to have some of the panelists, Nevi and Christian and Michael. They are some of the most active members in the network of the European Film Commission. And we are almost 100 members from 30 different countries. So we are a really powerful network. We have been looking into to see if we can establish a working group to push this forward, to really make green filming, to put it on top of the agenda. So and to be here today and hear all this loading talking about this has really been inspiring. And I can emphasize also that you have done a really good job, because in Norway now we have Universal doing a really big shoot. And I talked with them just before I left down here, and I was impressed how they are into green protocol. Every department have a really detailed how they should behave, and we have nothing like that in Scandinavia at all. But we are trying to set this on the agenda, and from the 1st of January we will have incentives in Norway, 25% incentives, and one of the criteria there is that you should have a green protocol for shooting.
Very good.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to say that the studios, when we were talking about Warner Brothers, Sony, Paramount, Disney, Fox, Universal, have been calculating their carbon for years in terms of the studio itself. And so it was really, this last measure in the last 7 or 8 years has been to push out into the productions. But the great thing for us is that they're all supportive of what we want to do. They want us as producers to inspire the producers to get on board, because on the ground they don't have as much influence, and so that's how, that's where PGA Green came in. And for us, having that support, for me to be able to fly an eco-supervisor over to Africa, Disney had a sustainability rep who was like, yeah, that's a good idea. And it's not, people don't really know that the studios have been thinking about that for a long time, but I'm happy to hear that you're experiencing it too.
Yeah, Lydia, I also would like to ask you, production can only be so green as the people really make it. And I think it's very important that you have a producer who's very powerful and believing in it and influential, but who is also doing a very well planning in the pre-production, and so yet that you have a different department heads and so, but this means really people have also to change their workflows. What are your experiences? So it's probably not always going smooth or so can you talk about the different experiences?
Yeah, it's not always smooth, and I'd say we've all noticed a shift that it's gotten better from when we started 9 years ago. We think about it. When I know that I'm going into production on a job, I have a very serious conversation with the director, because the director, can really set the tone in a major way, and they cannot be hanging out on the set with a plastic water bottle in their hand. They just can't, And so I always say to them that this is something that's extremely important to me. I have found that usually I can find, some of the actors who it's important to them, and it kind of, hopefully the director gets on board, and then it sets a tone for everybody else. But when we hire the crew, when we hire the department heads, it's something that we bring up. It's like, that we're going to be a sustainable production. We'd like to know that, this is something you'll support in your department. You start right at the beginning, and then you start having production meetings, in pre-production, where you're just organizing. And sometimes, particularly when I'm on location, one of my things is I like to form a green team. I just say to the crew, who wants to be on my green team? We're going to just have our own club where we can really supervise these initiatives and get together and talk about it. And we inevitably get together and people are really excited about trying different things where we are. And it just creates a spirit to kind of make it happen. And then the next thing that really helps is if you write about it, while you're in production. So you send memos to the crew. We'll have a start of production memo. This is what we're doing. This is what our goals are. And then midway through, by the way, we've accomplished this so far. Did you know that we're taking the batteries, that aren't being used up all the way by the sound mixer and giving them to the makeup and hair department to use in their blow dryer so they're completely exhausted before we recycle them? People get excited about, oh, wow, I didn't know that was happening on our movie. And so you have to keep the conversation going so that people begin to feel that they're part of a greater effort, that they're doing something that's bigger, bigger than ourselves.
And does it have a snowball effect that they continue like this when they go into the next production?
Oh, hopefully. I mean, we do see it happen. I mean, I love the stories that I hear about, like the location manager who, was really not on board in the beginning, and then by the end you see him sorting garbage and separating things. He just can't stand it that somebody put the wrong thing in the wrong bin. And you know that they're going to carry that on to their next production when they order the bins and the recycling and everything is separated. When they hire the vendor, to take the trash away, where is it going? Is it being separated? I think it does carry on. You don't get everybody, but if even if you get 80-90%, that's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we are moving on to Mexico, who has been the boss of a big film archive for many, many years, and since 3-4 years you're running the Guadalajara Film Festival, which must be really exciting. And so, as I mentioned earlier, you hosted the Film for Climate workshop in March, and so maybe you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, of course, first of all, sorry for my terrible English, and of course for my nothing French. The only very useful word I learned in Cannes Film Festival is désolé, je suis désolé. So it's a very useful one to say. So I hope the translators can help me. Yes, as you mentioned, we contribute to open the discussion in Guadalajara this time. I hate to say we were the first, and we were maybe the second or the fifth, I don't know, but we contribute really to open the discussion for Latin America, and that I think was very productive. We consider, of course, film festival as part of the film industry, and we have to start it also from home, and we try to have a sustainable festival. It was nothing very well known until that moment. We didn't succeed. We tried to calculate our carbon footprint, but we got a lot of advice from the local environmental ministry. And I think that the positive thing is that many other events want to go in that direction. That is important also out of the film industry, because a very important tourist industry is what they call the convention tourism, and Mexico has to develop that big events. So that's a good point of that. The discussion, I think, was very positive in Guadalajara, but also introduced maybe some elements that were not considered in the original chart, that were the shooting in nature. We had the contribution of Alfredo Cuarón, who is Alfonso's brother, the biologist of the family, and he made a research in the 70s about bad examples of filming, and there was a special one event in the 70s from a very important Mexican film director that shot it in an island, and they brought the boa snakes that they forgot to take out when they finished the production, and the boa disappeared too, and the endemic species in the island. So there was a bad case, but of course he made a list of good and bad cases, and that was very interesting to be discussed in the point. That experience also was applied in different parts of Iberoamerica, because our festival is mostly for Spanish and Portuguese speaker countries, and well, that really was developed by Donald Rambau in different other countries. And yes, we now consider the important part that to consider Fund for Climate as a permanent section, at least for the next 5 years, and to have and to become kind of observatory of how the process is behaving, how things are changing and how things are updated. So the idea is to have this Fund for Climate section together to not to show films about that, but also big discussions with film directors and people from the industry towards that, something what happened here, or similar to what happened here. And of course, the most important part is also for us is education. The festival has a talent campus related with Berlinale, and of course, many of these discussions would be for that students or emergency filmmakers, but also we are developing, and that's where we want to really work in a diplomat to produce and shoot environmental films. Mexico is a mega diverse country. There's a lot of climate, except tundra. We have every kind of climate, so it's a very good place for filming. And we have good technicians sometimes, but I think we need to have cinematographers that understand also the way to shoot and to film in nature, and that will contribute also to tackle climate change.
Yeah, and more than that, I understand that you also have solar cinema in Latin America, that eco-cinema, which is a solar cinema, which is a simple van, but which comes with a solar panel on its roof, so that the whole solar cinema can travel where is no cinema, and then also it's solar powered. So you have already 5 of these vans all over Latin America. You also had it at your festival?
Yeah, we have the relationship with them, and also, of course, we have cycling movements that also they make projections. We cycle all the people with the bicycle all together and generating electricity for the projection. But that's also another way we have.
Oh yeah, this is maybe also something interesting for Christopher in Kenya. So it's like that everything is somehow linked and working out and networking, and this is also something that Slater said to me, that she felt like everything really is somehow linked together. And yeah, Slater, you started really to do your first movies when you were 5 years old. It's really incredible. So what inspired you, and what made it make you to go around the world all the time and hooking up with so many other young environmentalists?
Thank you. It's both an honor and a bit odd to be on this panel, because being among heads of film festivals and film commissions, and hello. No, it's I did start making movies when I was young. I think primarily because it was available and it was around. I grew up in Los Angeles, and a lot of our friends and I guess kind of my adopted family, in a sense, were creative activists, and really viewed the whole concept of storytelling in film as this powerful tool for how we can connect as human beings. Because how do we learn as kids? How do we learn as young people about the world around us and about the kind of world that we want to build? It's through stories, and it's how we connect to each other. So for me, it was it was a very kind of natural meshing of things when I started to become very much inspired and horrified, but inspired by climate change as a way to change everything, to change the way that we live with each other and with our relationship to the planet. So I guess I really started on this journey of making this film as a way to, we were talking earlier about how we need to see climate change and we need to see more positive, sustainable lifestyles represented in film. One thing I wasn't seeing was the voice of the next generation, was the voice of those who will be inheriting a world that is profoundly different from the ones that our parents grew up in. Which is strange because you go to climate change conferences, to Copenhagen, COP15 and whatnot, and young people are usually the first people who are kind of pushed to the sidelines or lose their accreditation when things become a little hairy, and it doesn't make sense to me that we wouldn't have a say in our own lives.
It's very interesting because also in film production, whenever I talk to people and about changing habits, changing workflows, the young people are really open and interested. They really want to change things for a better world and are also willing to change their own work. While people who have been in the business for 30 or 40 years, for them it's more complicated because they are so trained to do what they're doing and they are not so much willing to change, and so they have already enough things to consider and they don't have time, they don't have money. But young people are fresh and open, and so they are also the ones who can really make it happen. I mean, there are also in Germany, for example, there are film schools where sustainable film production has a huge impact, like in Hamburg, and now in Belgium they will do it in Italy and everywhere, and I think in the States too. So young people are the ones who can actually make a lot of change. But I understand we also can see a few minutes of your film now?
Yes, definitely. It will say more than I can rambling. If I could just take this kind of moment of waiting to say that it's interesting what you say about how young people seem to be the most willing to change and the most willing and open to shifting lifestyles. And here we go. Is there sound?
In 1992, the year I was born, our world leaders gathered at the first climate change conference in Rio de Janeiro and told us they would take action on climate change. And still, our leaders are not leading. If this leader won't lead, then it's time to change the leader.
My name is Slater, and I'm 850 feet above the largest industrial project on Earth. Wondering just how it was that I got here. 7 years ago, I started telling the stories of the young people behind the global youth climate movement. I didn't intend to be doing it this long, but for some reason I haven't been able to stop. If you're like us, climate change doesn't amount to inconvenient weather or spoiled retirement plans. If you're like us, climate change is rising up in the middle of your life, and for the first time in generations, the future that our parents promised us might not be there.
Nepal is the 4th most vulnerable country to the effects of climate change. We don't even emit 1% of carbon dioxide, and the impacts are the highest.
We've been having very severe floods every year in Bangladesh. As a result of that, we've had famine because there's not been enough food being produced.
The melting of glaciers, which affects the city I live in La Paz, is really a big problem for us. We're not going to have water in 20 years.
We did not do any of these things. But if things go business as usual, we will die. Our country will not exist. We have to make a deal in Copenhagen.
poor countries who have contributed the least to the problem that we're seeing with climate change and who are already being impacted by climate change and are the most vulnerable are the ones that are not getting any support.
People are dying because of this process, not having reached the conclusion that it should have.
The whole process is unjust. The whole process is obsolete. And I don't know if it ever did work, but it's certainly not working in 2009 when we have very little time left.
The climate crisis is madness. It is the 19th COP, but we might as well stop counting because my country refuses to accept that a COP30 or a COP40 will be needed to solve climate change.
20 years, 20 conferences, with virtually no progress made, to the point where it feels like we're in a room slowly filling with water. And the water's up to our chests now, and we're screaming, and our leaders say, "It's only up to your chest. We'll deal with it next year."
This process does not work! Does not work! The future we want is not found here! 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 The future we want is not found here!
Growing up as a little girl, I saw a world that was really, really beautiful, and I was really in love with it. And I saw the good in people.
We've opened our minds, but our hearts as well. I think we will be able to understand each other and somehow change things.
By having personal relationships with someone that seems to be so far away from you, you really develop the sense of empathy, which is something we all believe very crucial in solving a global crisis.
I care about the future of my family. I care about the future of my country. I care that my actions, my community's actions, will impact people around the world in ways that may end up destroying their homes.
We can have a future where we're all a whole lot healthier and happier if we work to tackle climate change. So why wouldn't you try and make those structural changes?
Millions of young people around the world seem to be able to understand and come together on it, and we wonder why our leaders, the people who are supposed to represent us, can't do the same.
I would want my children to see how beautiful this place is. I love the mountains in my country. I love the rivers. I love my earth.
I've been telling this story for 7 years now, and I'm starting to understand why I'm still here. Because they are. These young people who refuse to give up, doing anything and everything they can to be heard, to fight for a clean, sustainable world that we know is still possible. We have another chance, maybe our last chance, in the City of Lights. The clock is ticking, but maybe, just maybe, this December in Paris, we can get it right this time.
Wow, this is very powerful. So you're going to the COP on December 3rd for the Youth Day. So,
well, I'll be attending the entire conference. Yes.
So, what are your expectations this time?
You know, it's very difficult to say because a lot of people that I've been working with who are global campaigners at avance.org or 350.org or who are big environmentalists in the movement, are in a lot of ways a little bit devastated because so many of our plans, so many of the marches and real mobilization of people in the streets has been, of course, not allowed after the recent Paris attacks, which is it's a bizarre thing because as climate change starts to become more and more destructive and dangerous, countries are going to be less willing to speak to each other, and nations are going to be not as open to potentially giving up some of their national interest for an international, I guess, kind of coming together. But I mean, it is the 21st conference. It is the 21st year that we have been talking, that we have been gathering together at these conferences and trying to figure out what we can do about climate change. And young people are coming together, and a lot of people share this idea that if it doesn't happen now, if it's not happening at COP21, like the negotiator from the Philippines said, we can't wait for a COP30 or a COP40. People are already suffering and people are already dying right now. If we wait for the effects to hit some of the Western countries the way that it is hitting the global South, then it will already be too late. So the feeling is that it's either all going to happen here at COP21, that we're going to come together as people, and that we're going to come together as a human family, finally, to change the way that we live so that we can survive and adapt, or these conferences have become obsolete and we need to find a different way, and we need to take that energy and that passion of climate change, of seeing how it is linked to all parts of our lives, and taking it into the streets and taking it into our own lives and really embracing a more grassroots and local level of change.
Yeah, so we need a policy change, and if this is not going to happen, then at least we have to take action in our own way, and so the film and media industry hopefully does also a good example for it, and you can start to do it right now by signing this film climate chapter. Yeah, okay. Okay, then I really thank you all for being here.